Hello, everyone. Welcome to Court with Krissy. And how could I not include Linda? This defendant wants immunity, right? Meow. I might call it a cat fight, but you want to watch all the way to the end. Was it a waste of court's time? Find out. We hope you like it. Court with Krissy and Linda is now in session.
All right, I'm ready to go forward. Ms. Hagler, if you could tell Mr. Tipton, I'm ready to move forward.
Okay, I believe he is talking to the, but I will
All right,
walk.
Mr. Tipton, are we ready?
Yes, Your Honor, we are ready.
All right, this is State of Georgia versus Amanda Williams, 2023 CR 05711. Ms. Williams is charged with battery by provocation and simple battery. Ms. Williams has filed a motion for immunity from prosecution. She's represented by the law firm of Lister Holt and Dennis. Mr. Owen Lynch is representing Ms. Williams. The state is represented by Mr. William Tipton. Mr. Tipton, we're before the court for the immunity. Are you all ready to go forward?
State is ready, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Lynch.
Yes, Your Honor. Defense would call Miss Amanda Williams.
All right, Miss Williams, raise your right hand for me. You solemnly swear or affirm any testimony you give in this matter will be true.
I do.
All right, so you can put your hand down. So, Ms. Williams, you have a right under the Constitution of the United States to, under the Fifth Amendment, to not incriminate yourself. That means you do not have to give any evidence or testimony against yourself. So you are not required and nobody can make you testify. Do you understand that by testifying, you're giving up your right to remain silent?
I do.
Have you talked with your attorney? Don't tell me what you discussed, but have you had the opportunity to consult with your attorney about what this means?
I have.
All right. And you are you voluntarily giving up your right to remain silent and offering testimony in this case?
I am.
And you're aware that any testimony that you use in this case can be used, that you give in this case can be used against you by any party prosecuting an offense against you.
Correct.
All right. All right, Mr. Lynch, your witness.
Miss Williams, could you state you've stated your name for the record. How old are you?
I'm 45.
And how are you currently employed?
I work full-time in property management.
Okay. So I want to direct your attention to, well, let me ask you this. Do you know Jessica Morris?
I do.
And I'm not sure if there's a way to turn up your volume or
Yeah, I think so.
or maybe just move the mic slightly.
Miss Martin, can you hear?
Is this better?
Yeah, that's better. That's
much better.
Okay.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Martin.
Can you describe to the court how you first met Miss Morris and the nature of your relationship?
I hired her to work for me as a team member while I was the general manager of Sonic in Conyers.
Okay, and after you hired her, well, tell me about how your relationship progressed and
Well,
what kind of interactions you had with Miss Morris.
I found Jessica to be an articulate, bright, good girl, a good student, very smart and promising. She was a hard worker, and I became very fond of her and concerned with her well-being.
Okay. So at that point, you were working with her at Sonic's, right?
Correct.
Did there come a time when Miss Morris lived with you?
Yes, there was.
I'm sorry, when Miss Morris, what? Because I couldn't hear the last word you said, Mr. Lynch.
When Miss Morris began to reside in Miss Williams' home, I'm asking when that first occurred.
Jessica was right at graduating her senior year, and she came to live with Greg and I at that time because she was homeless and had a broken leg.
Okay. And you said she came to live with Greg and I. Who are you referring to by Greg?
Greg Cook.
And who is Greg Cook to you?
He was my partner for 10 years.
Okay. And when Miss Morris lived with you the first time, Mr. Cook lived there as well the entire time.
Correct.
Who else lived in the house with you?
My son and my stepdaughter and my stepson.
Okay. Now, on the first period of time where Miss Morris lived with you, can you tell the court how that period of residence ended?
Well, Miss Morris, after she graduated, I took her to her graduation and got her cast off because she broke her leg. So we got her a cast to put on it. She began looking at colleges. And so I was taking her around and doing applications, visiting colleges. She wanted to be a CSI investigator, which I thought would be really good for her. It took a little bit of a turn. She started seeing someone and started kind of like, maybe I won't go to college. And so I told her, I said, well, you're going to have to make money somehow, and took her under my wing and showed her how to run restaurants so she could at least support herself. Um, After she got pretty darn good at it, where I felt she would be competent, she moved to Ohio with our blessings and good tidings.
Okay. And when she moved to Ohio, were the skills that you taught her about working in restaurants, was there an opportunity in Ohio for her to use those skills? And did you have any involvement in procuring that opportunity for Miss Morris?
Yes, she had applied to work at a Sonic there in management. It would have been her first management position. And I gave her a glowing recommendation for that job.
Okay. Now, after Miss Morris left your household and moved to Ohio, did she ever return to live with you?
She did.
Can you explain to the court the circumstances of her return?
She had called me, and we weren't talking as much as, we probably could have. Life goes on, and she had told me that she had been physically assaulted twice in 1 week, that she was homeless, that things were not good for her. And I was like, why are you staying there? Just why don't you come back here? Or you go to, Missouri, Mississippi, somewhere where you know someone who can help. And it was a very awkward conversation, as it was very hard for me to keep her focused and on track with the actual conversation that we were having. We spoke about 3 times, and on that third call, she said, okay, I'm going to come. I'm going to live at my dad's house. And I said, you know what? You can work with me. Where I'm running a skating rink in Stockbridge, which isn't too far from your dad's. You can come work for me. I'll give you a job. I was currently at that time, the day she arrived in Oklahoma, saying goodbye to my dad, who was passing in hospice of cancer. The day that she arrived. So she called me at 4 a.m. and explained to me that her dad was not going to let her in the house. And I told her I was in Oklahoma saying goodbye to my dad, and that she would need to call Greg if she needed some assistance because he's back in Georgia. And I went to sleep.
Okay. Did you and Greg have any discussions about, whether it would be okay for Miss Morris to come live with you again?
Greg and I did not.
Okay. But ultimately, did Miss Morris come to live with you again?
When I returned home the next day, she was there, and I was like, oh, how's it going? And he was like, you'll see. And apparently Greg had told her that as long as she works and, that she could stay, that we would never put her out, that she has always had family with us. And
Objection, Your Honor. This is hearsay at this point.
well, he was saying it to me.
Um,
Apologies.
I'm sorry. So you were, that's fine. We can move on to the next question. Okay, so now she's back living with you in your house with your husband and your child. Was anyone else living there?
My two stepchildren were still living there.
Okay.
My stepdaughter, my stepson.
Did you notice any changes in Miss Morris's behavior compared to the way you had known her to be prior to that?
Absolutely.
Can you explain that to the court?
Where I had found her to be bubbly and funny and hardworking and great to a good conversationalist, all of that was gone. We would directly say Jessica, 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 Jay, and nothing would be reason why she couldn't hear us, but she would not respond. She just sat in the yard on a rock and stared into the streets for 6, 8, 12 hours at a time and would not respond to us speaking to her.
Okay. Was she working at that time?
I had given her the job at with me, but that did not work out. The first day, she went outside and sat down and got on her phone and proceeded to make phone calls and just did not come back in for hours. I lost her for hours. She was behind our building.
Okay. So at this point, I want to turn your attention to March 30th of 2022, the incident that we're here about. Do you remember that day?
I do. It was my birthday.
Okay. Now, I want you to explain to the court. Well, let me ask you this. Did you and Miss Morris have any kind of a verbal argument that morning?
She attempted to argue with me. I turned to walk away. I do not do arguing.
Okay. Tell me about the nature of what was discussed prior to any physical contact that happened. Tell me about what was discussed and what any disagreement there may have been.
I woke up, got dressed, ready for work. When she was supposed to do her second day, she had gone back to Sonic, right down the street from my current job. So it was time for me to go. And I walked outside. I set my purse down on the porch and walked outside and asked her if she needed a ride. She didn't have a car or anything, and I was headed that way. And asked her if she needed a ride to work, and she was unresponsive and angry. I felt she was angry, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And she said that I was manipulating her, and I'm like, "How so?" She told me that by paying her phone bill instead of driving her around to make the money to pay her own phone bill, that I was attempting to manipulate her. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. She began yelling and telling me how sick and tired she was of people manipulating her and using her. And I told her, no, ma'am, we are not going to do this. And I turned to walk away, and she starts pulling at her hair and slapping herself in the forehead. And I said, this isn't going to work. You're going to need to find somewhere else to go. And I went to go to the porch to get my purse and leave.
Okay. So after you said this isn't working, you're going to have to find some place to go. You indicated that you walked away. Where did you walk?
I was going to the front porch to retrieve my purse and keys so that I could go to work.
Okay. And what happened next?
She continued to yell at me. I was almost to the front door when I realized that she was not only yelling at me, that she was approaching my backside very quickly. And so my son does every day and opens the door to tell me goodbye. And I turned and put my son at my rear and stepped backwards into my door. About that time, I went to go shut the door. She was within an arm's reach of me, and I pushed her backwards and attempted to shut the door, but I never got the door completely shut before she pushed through very hard enough to knock me off my feet and onto my back, where she got on top of me and began hitting me and leaving me unable to defend myself or my son.
Okay, and so all this happened in front of your son?
Yes.
Okay, and before you pushed her, can you tell the court again well, let me ask you this. What were you thinking when she was approaching you in that manner?
I was thinking that I had to protect me and my son because I did not know what she was going to do, and I was afraid.
And prior to that, you mentioned that you had seen her hitting herself.
Yes.
And she was cursing at you.
Mm-hmm.
And
you can't say or
yes, yes,
You have to
ma'am.
say
She
yes.
was. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry
and that
about
was
that.
immediately before she approached you rapidly in an aggressive manner. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay. So you testified that you attempted to push her back. Was that is that a yes?
Yes, that is correct.
But afterwards, you're telling the court she still ended up on top of you?
I did not have enough momentum to push her back so that I could slam the door and lock it.
Okay. And she struck you multiple times in front of your child.
She did.
Now, how did she eventually get off of you?
She was screaming for Desiree to come downstairs. Once Desiree, my stepdaughter, came downstairs, she realized, I said, Desiree, I was talking calm. I said, Desiree, get Ethan and take him out of the room. Get Ethan and take him out of the room. And then I started talking to Jessica, who I normally call Jay, but I started calling her full name. I was like, Jessica, stop. You need to stop. And I said, okay, I'm going to get up now. And I rolled over onto my knees and stood up with her on my back.
Okay.
It wasn't easy. It took many attempts.
And at some point, well, how did you eventually get physically disconnected from Miss Morris?
I think that once I was able to get almost all the way up, she stopped hitting me and let go.
Okay. And what happened after that?
She started yelling and screaming at us, telling us that, cussing at me, saying, B, you're going to go to jail. I'm going to make sure you go to jail. And then she's then started, I said, you need to leave. You need to go outside. You need to get out of my home. She went outside and began putting us on Facebook Live, screaming at all of the neighbors that these white honkies and like trying to get everyone's attention. I'm going on for probably 10 minutes about how we hate ends.
At some point, did your then partner did he return?
He did. His daughter had reached out to him and called and said that he needed to come home immediately.
Okay. And after Mr. Cook, right?
Mr. Cook.
After
Yes, sir.
he returned home, did you go anywhere?
Yes. Once I knew that someone was there that could protect my son, I removed myself from the threat and the situation and went to work. And I called my boss and let him know that I was going to be a few minutes behind, that I needed to pull over and calm down and collect myself.
Okay. Ms. Williams, you stated that, well, let me answer this. How did the behavior of Miss Morris influence how you acted when she approached you?
She was erratic, completely out of character, not her normal self. I've never seen her behave that way. She was aggressive, and I reacted the way any person in their right mind would react when they felt threatened and they needed to protect their child. I defended myself.
Were you afraid that you might be injured by Miss Morris?
Yes, but I was more afraid that my son would be.
Okay. No further questions.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Tipton,
Yes, Your Honor.
cross-examination,
Yes, Your Honor.
go ahead.
Hey, Miss Williams, how you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Okay. So, Miss Williams, I want to ask a couple questions about what happened, okay? So, could you explain to me where you live or where you lived at the time and like what kind of building was it? Was it an apartment? Was it a house?
We lived in Clayton County off of Maddox Road in a split level home.
Okay, so it was a house.
Correct.
Okay. And was it a big house? Was there a big backyard? Tell me about it.
It's a corner house. I wouldn't consider it to be large by my standards.
Okay.
Medium size house.
Okay. And
Older.
okay. And you mentioned you had a verbal argument that morning. Is that correct?
Incorrect. I said she attempted to have a verbal argument with me, and I told her I will not argue with you.
Okay. And you you said she was pulling her hair and slapping her forehead, right?
Yes,
Okay. So I'm gonna ask Miss Williams, do you consider yourself a truthful person?
I do.
Are you familiar with the term prim and falsi?
I have no idea what that means.
Okay, well, let me point to you like this. Have you ever been arrested for fraud?
I have.
Mm-hmm. How many times?
I was arrested one time on fraud.
Okay, but were you charged with fraud multiple times?
I was charged with fraud multiple times.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Was
I'm gonna
arrested
object
and
at this point, Judge. If the state wants to introduce convictions, they can, but they don't have a right to question my client about the underlying facts of the case.
Okay, understood.
Mr. Tipton,
Your Honor, we're talking about the defendant's character of truthfulness in here.
all
Now,
right, and unless you have certified convictions, you've gone about as far with the underlying facts as you need to.
understood. So you mentioned that Miss Morris had been hitting her head and pulling her hair.
she was slapping her head and pulling on her hair and hitting herself in the head.
Mm-hmm. And was that the only time she hit her head?
The only time I witnessed her hit her head is the time that I told you about, sir.
And when you pushed her away, what did you push her away with?
My hand.
Okay. And what part of her body did you push away?
I have no idea, to be honest,
Okay.
because I was shutting the door at the exact same time, including my arm in the door.
Okay. Did you have any mark on your arm?
I did have marks.
Did you show that to the police?
The police never came and spoke with me. They never came to take pictures. I never stood in front of any police officers.
Hmm.
Not that I can recall. It's been a few years now.
Okay, then. And so when you saw Jessica, was she bleeding?
She was bleeding.
Where was she bleeding from?
I only seen her with one eye because it was on me. So I'm not sure where. I'm not a nurse. I don't know where the blood was coming from.
I'm sorry, what was on you, ma'am?
Her blood was where she had been on top of me was on my face. I can tell you that. It was on my face.
Hmm.
Because I couldn't wipe my hands. I couldn't wipe my face or anything because she had me by my arms.
Understood.
I was pinned.
You were pinned, but you pushed her away?
She had pinned me and was hitting me. She had one of my arms pinned and was hitting me with the other hand.
Okay, but you just stated that you closed the door on her.
I
That's
attempted to
different.
close the door
Characterizing
on
the
her.
testimony.
And you closed the door on her and yourself, is what you just told me. And you had a mark on your arm as a result of closing the door on her.
I told you that I attempted to push her away while closing the door, not only on her, but on myself even. I was trying to get the door shut, which I was unsuccessful at, is what I said.
Okay, but
Because the door never got shut all the way before she came through it and knocked me off of my feet.
so when you saw her running towards you, how far away was she initially?
Multiple car links
Okay.
when I walked away from her. She was at the end of my driveway when I walked away from her.
Okay, so she wasn't inside of the house. She was inside, she was at the end of the driveway.
When I walked away from her before any physical contact, when I told her I'm not going to argue with you, and I turned to walk away, we were having that conversation at the end of my driveway.
Okay, but earlier you stated that that happened, time passed, and you went and got ready for work. And then the
No.
incident again happened when you
I'm going to object to Mr. Tipton completely mischaracterizing the testimony and putting words in my client's mouth.
Mr. Tipton, you're restating facts not in evidence. As the court recalls, she testified that she got ready for work. She came outside. She put her purse on the porch. Once she put her purse on the porch was when she and Miss Morris engaged in a conversation. So we're past the point where she was getting dressed.
Oh, okay. That was my apologies, Your Honor. I misunderstood what she'd said earlier then. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
All right. Any follow-up, Mr. Lynch?
Just real quick, Ms. Williams, you took an oath to testify truthfully today, did you not?
I did.
Do you take that seriously?
I do. I've had no bad conduct, an upstanding citizen, and I take that seriously as well.
And Mr. Tipton alluded to some legal troubles that you had in the past. How long ago were you arrested for the offense that he mentioned?
20 years.
Okay.
20 years.
Okay. Have you been arrested for anything violent?
Never.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions for Ms. Williams at this time.
All right. Anything else from the state?
Well, from the defense, Your Honor, I do have another witness. I'm Gregory Michael Cook in the, oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Lynch.
I know.
Focus.
I
I
gotta slow
got
down.
it. You just asked her questions. They have the right, if they wish, within the scope to follow up. Are there any other questions at this time from Ms. Williams, Mr. Tipton?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So, Ms. Williams, you may be excused. You stay on. You can continue to watch. Just mute your device. The defense has another witness to call.
Yes, I would call Gregory Michael Cook.
All right. Is Mr. Cook in court?
He's in the courtroom.
All right. Come on up, Mr. Cook.
And I hadn't done one of these hearings in this way, so I guess he just got to stand next to me. I don't know any other.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Come on up, Mr. Cook, a little bit closer, because of the limitations of the audio visual system, and you're speaking directly into the computer. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Raise your right hand for me. You solemnly swear or affirm any testimony you give in this matter will be true.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You can put your hand down, Mr. Lynch. Your witness.
Mr. Cook, how do you know Ms. Williams?
She is my ex-girlfriend, ex-fiance.
Okay. How long did you live with her?
10 years.
When you lived with her, was there a period where Jessica Morris lived with you guys?
Two different periods of time, yes.
Okay. And during that first period of time, was everything okay as far as her living there? Was she able to you know, do what she needed to do to have y'all's approval to live there?
Yeah, she was a great person. She was very energetic, very upbeat person when the first time she lived with us.
Okay. I want you to tell me about any differences that you observed in the way Miss Morris behaved in your household on the second time that she lived with you guys.
She was more withdrawn. She kept to herself a lot. She didn't want to be part of anything like she did the first time. She didn't, we tried to offer her help. It seemed like she would rather do it on her own than accept our help, and which I was okay with. This was fine. If you what you want to do, it's what you want to do. It just seemed like she was a little more off-putting the second time.
Okay. Were you aware of any ways in which Miss Williams attempted to help Miss Morris?
Yeah, she tried to get her jobs. She tried to help her out financially. We tried to help her out financially any way we could, and you know, give her opportunities, take her where she needed to go. I mean, unless we were ill or didn't feel good that day, then you know, yeah, we did everything we could to make sure that she had transportation and that we could get her wherever she wanted to go.
Did you witness any times when Miss Morris would express anger or resentment of Miss Williams during that second time she lived with you?
Not so much angry. There might have been some resentment, but it might have been some resentment between the two of them. I'm not really 100% sure what happened after that, but Miss Morris just didn't seem like the same person anymore. She just, I guess, something happened in Ohio that she decided that was going to continue her. I'm not even sure how to put this in words.
We'll try to.
What was the question again? I want to try and give a proper answer.
Well, you know what? We can move on. Let's turn our attention to, no, you're fine. March 30th, 2022.
Okay.
The day that we're here about. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
At
Yes.
some point, did you receive a call asking?
Mr. Lynch, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. So this hasn't come up, and this is bugging me. So what was the length of time between the first time she resided with them and the second time? Like, how much time passed?
I could recall Miss Williams to answer that question.
Mr. Cook right there.
Mr. Cook, can you tell the court about how much time had elapsed between the time when she moved out and she moved back in?
She was a high school senior graduating when she was the first time, and the second time, I believe, she was at least 21 or 22. So maybe 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. And that's just recollection, ma'am. I'm not 100% sure that's true.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Did you have any other questions at this time, Your Honor?
Nope.
Thank you. And so did you receive a call asking you to return to the residence on March, or to come to the residence
Yes.
on March 30th of 2022?
Yes, I did.
Who called you?
My daughter, Desiree,
And what did she tell you?
that Amanda and Jay were getting into a fight, and then I needed to come home.
Okay. When you came home, did you have an opportunity to observe Miss Morris?
Yes, Miss Morris was still at what Miss Amanda said, Miss Morris was at the end of the driveway when I arrived.
Okay, and what was she doing?
She was sitting there. At the time, she was still yelling obscenities, screaming obscenities towards the house. I think they were mostly made towards Miss Amanda. She was being very, she was angry. She was very upset. She was just a lot of obscenities towards the house.
Okay. And at that point, when you got there, did Miss Williams remain at the house?
Oh, when I got there, like I said, Miss Morris was at the end of the driveway. I talked to Miss Williams. She was in her car on the side road. I talked to Miss Williams. Miss Williams said, if everything is okay, if you got everything from here on, I need to go to work. I said, that's fine. I can take care of it from here. No problem. Miss Williams took off and I stood at the doorway and that's.
Did Miss Williams tell you what happened as far as the physical altercation between her and Miss Morris?
Yes.
Can you tell me what Miss Williams told you about it?
Miss Morris was out in the street, driveway in the street, yelling and screaming obscenities. Miss Williams went out there to talk to her to try and calm her down, get her to settle down. I don't know what happened at that point, but I do know that Miss Williams said that she wasn't going the way that that she was hoping it would go. So she was walking away. By the time she got to the steps, she heard commotion behind her. She turned around to see Miss Morris charging at her. From what I understand, they might have collided there. I'm not 100% sure. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But Miss Morris ended up on top of Miss Williams, and I guess she saw Ethan or something, decided to stop and got up.
Okay. No further questions at this time. He's gonna ask you something.
That's fine.
Judge, you're muted.
Cross-examination, Mr. Tipton?
Very brief, Your Honor. So, Mr. Cook, I just want to make sure I understand. So you weren't there during any of this, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And everything you heard was from Miss Williams, is that correct?
Miss Williams and my daughter, Desiree.
Okay. Did you at any point in time speak to the police?
I did.
Okay. And what did you tell the police happened?
I told the police that they got into a misunderstanding and that I was under the impression that Miss Williams wanted Miss Morris out of the house. I agreed with Miss Williams because of the situation that I was told, and I wanted my family to be safe. So I agreed that Miss Morris should leave the place where the residence where we were at, and I had a conversation with the police at that time.
How long were the police there?
I'm sorry?
How long were the police there?
The police were there for a good amount of time, probably 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour.
Was Miss Williams present at all when the police were there?
I do not believe so.
Okay. No further questions.
I got a question. So when the police were there, what happened with Miss Morris?
She calmed way down her screaming and yelling. It quit. She stopped screaming and yelling. She started acting a lot more appropriately.
Okay, did she leave at any point?
Eventually, she did. I offered to take her to the train station, a bus station. I offered to take her to a hotel, put her in a room. She did not want any of that. The police told me that I was legally obligated to have to let her back into my house because I told her she could stay at my house. And I said, that's fine. I said, Jessica, you want to stay here? You can come on in. At that time, she asked for all her stuff. I grabbed what I could see that was hers. I put it next to her. I believe the police left like 15 minutes later, and then maybe 5 or 10 minutes after that, somebody came and picked up Miss Morris.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any follow-up from the state? Anything from the defense?
No, Your Honor, none from the state.
All right, Mr. Lynch.
I don't have any further witnesses, Judge.
All right, Mr. Cook, you can remain in the courtroom if you wish, but you're excused otherwise. All right, so does the state have witnesses to present in this case?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would like to call Jessica Morris to the Zoom call.
All right, Ms. Morris, can you show your video?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so Ms. Morris, raise your right hand for me. Solemnly swear or affirm any testimony you give in this matter will be true.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you can put your hand down. Mr. Tipton, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Morris, please state your name for the court reporter.
Jessica Deshawn Morris.
Okay. And Miss Morris, how are you familiar with Miss Amanda Williams?
We originally met during my senior year, working at Sonic in Conyers, Georgia. Um, I was already working there at the time when she first started working there. Um, she was hired to be I think, assistant manager or general manager. We got very close during that time frame. And from there, eventually I started having problems at home with my, dad and stepmom. I broke my ankle, didn't have insurance. She was nice enough to set up a GoFundMe for me, to like get a cast and things like that, since I was still in school and I couldn't work.
Okay. Did you end up living with Miss Williams?
Yes, sir. Shortly after, I'd say maybe about a month after setting up setting up the GoFundMe account, that did not sit well with my parents. Well, when I say my parents, I mean my stepmom and my dad. They wanted me to tell her to cash out the GoFundMe account because they had bills to pay. That turned into a huge argument between us, and they ended up kicking me out with a broken ankle. Had nowhere to go. Stayed with a friend for a little bit, and then eventually stayed with. Amanda invited me to live with her in Morrow at the time. I was in like actual Conyers, and she lived in Morrow.
Did you live with her in 2022 at all?
I believe it was 2020. Yes, it was 2022. Yes.
Okay. I want to draw your attention to March the 30th of 2022. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
Okay. Could you walk me through what happened?
The points of that day that I specifically remember was me starting my day off like I normally was doing. At that time, I was sitting outside on like the green electrical box thing or whatever it is that sits in some of the yards. I spent most of my time there. I was on the phone, FaceTime actually, with my friend from Ohio. We spent a lot of time on the phone together, of course. So I was talking with her, and I remember just telling her how I had a bad feeling about the day. I was supposed to be going to work at Sonic, and I believe Amanda was still working at like Starlight or something it's called, a skating rink that she worked at. And I remember telling my friend that I don't think I'm gonna have her give me a ride to work. My friend, of course, asked me why. I told her I didn't have a good feeling about it. And once Amanda came out of the house, at this point, of course, I'm still in the yard. She's at the door telling me, "Come on, Jay, let's go." Which, of course, my nickname is Jay. Um, let's go to work. I told her, "No, I'm not getting in the car with you. I don't want to go with you." Um, she told me to get in the car again. I again said no. And then from there, I believe she went in the house for a moment, came back out, and told me to get my belongings and get out. Which at this point, again, I'm still outside, and I tell her that I don't have to leave. I knew this was going to happen. Greg told me to, if anything were to go down between the two of us, like words being said or anything like that, and she was trying to put me out, to just let him know or give him a call or something like that. He wasn't going to let her, put me out, because of course during the time um, that she was, gone, we had, spoke about her, things like that. So he kind of already knew, hey, Amanda's not that great, whatever. And he said, just basically said all that. I told her that. I guess that upset her. I don't know. She went back in the house for a minute, came back out, told me again to get my stuff and get out. At this point, I'm still on the phone outside with my friend, and she says to just let it go. I can just figure out how to get back to Ohio, get a bus ticket or something like that, and come back to live in Ohio with her. So I got off the green box, started walking towards the house to get my stuff, which I kept all of my belongings in the living room. She's standing in the doorway of the house. As I was walking past her, but not all the way past her because I didn't make it fully in the house, she took my head and like bashed it into the brick wall. Um, that's like the exterior of the house, which obviously caught me by surprise. And we ended up fighting from there. I dropped my phone and everything. My friend was still on the phone throughout the entire thing. But I dropped my phone and I actually did start putting my hands on her from there because honestly, I did snap and ultimately did not expect that to happen. But again, within that time period, I'd already been abused twice before this happened.
Okay. So you mentioned you walked back towards the house. Were you walking at a fast pace, at a regular pace? What kind of
No,
pace?
at a regular pace, mainly because I wouldn't say I was scared, but I definitely wasn't happy. Like I wasn't confident in, the way things would turn out, which again, I keep reiterating, I've been abused many times before, so I kind of know the signs before they happen. So I'm on the phone with my friend still, like on FaceTime. So I'm holding my phone, looking down at my phone, walking towards the house. It did take me at least, 30 to 40 seconds or so to get all the way to the front door.
Okay. You mentioned that that you had your head pushed into a brick wall.
I thought he said hand. Was it hand
No,
or head?
head. It's my
Head.
head.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you take pictures of your injuries?
I believe they did take pictures when the ambulance came, like the police or the ambulance did. Myself, I don't remember if I took pictures, but I do know that, like I said, I was literally still on like FaceTime with my friend the entire time that a lot of this was happening.
If I showed you pictures, would they accurate of your injury? Can you tell me if they accurately represented the scene at the time?
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, there was like blood leaking from like my forehead line, like here.
Here, look. Okay, well, I'm gonna show that to you, and I want you to let me know if you can authenticate it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
We'll stipulate to the photos.
Okay. Does this accurately represent your head on that day?
Yeah, well, yes, but not the entire thing because I know majority of the blood was coming from like it wasn't like my forehead itself, but it was definitely like in my hair. Like I couldn't see where it was coming from, but it was like everywhere. There was enough for it to be leaking down my face and onto hers.
Okay. Um, I'm gonna scroll down a little bit.
Okay,
Okay.
that looks more right because I can see a little bit like how it's red, like here.
hmm And what does this depict?
Yes, that makes sense because I know the ambulance, they told me that it wasn't like life threatening or anything like that. And it was not a huge gash there, but definitely enough, of course, for it to be bleeding like
And
that.
do you recognize this picture?
Um, Not 100%, no.
Okay, no problem. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce states 1, 2, and 3 into evidence.
All right, the defense stipulated, so they'll be in, the 3 pictures will be in evidence.
Yes, Your Honor, I will not be entering the 4th one since the defendant does not have a recollection.
That's fine.
Okay. I want to turn your attention to the State's Exhibit 2. It's the one that you said was more accurate. Could you tell me a bit about what I'm looking at, what this picture depicts?
That's just me, like I said, whoever it was, I don't know if it was the people from the ambulance or the police officer himself taking a picture of, the aftermath of it. Because, like I said, at the time, what started the incident was her bashing my head into the wall. And I'm not a lot taller than her, but I'm definitely taller than her. So it makes sense that it was more my head than my forehead.
I see. Okay. Did you at any point during this incident uh hit yourself?
No,
Did you at any point during this incident pull your own hair out?
no.
Okay. Where do you see blood in this picture in Safe Exhibit 2?
Did you ask me that?
Yes.
Sorry, the phone cut out. I see, like I said, a light. To me, it looks like a light amount of blood right now from basically my hairline and a little bit on my forehead and a decent amount of it like on my like eye, my nose, a little bit like under my cheek, maybe. Not under my cheek, but on my cheek a little bit.
Mhm. I want to draw your attention to State's Exhibit 3. Looks like, so let's see, about, I'll withdraw that question. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. So there was a talk about an argument that initially broke out. How far were you from Miss Williams when the argument started initially?
The actual argument itself, which I wouldn't really call an argument because it wasn't a screaming back and forth at each other. It was just her, telling me to get in the car and I'm telling her no. I'm not really good with, distance wise, but like I said, their front yard is pretty big. It is was pretty big. It's a corner house. And I'm like at the corner on the green box, almost in the neighbor's yard, pretty much like where their property line is. Enough, like I said, enough time for if I was walking normally for it to take at least, 30 to 40 seconds for me to get all the way to the house, like front door where she was at.
Okay. And how was your tone when you were having this discussion?
At first, it was, I'd say, loud more than anything because it was, we're a far distance away, so I'm having to raise my voice to say, I'm not getting in the car with you. Like, just like, obviously it'll be louder, but just like I said it now, I'm not getting in the car with you, one line, and her telling me again, to which I'm not getting in the car with you, I don't want to.
Were you aggressive in how you spoke to her?
I wouldn't say that I was aggressive, but I probably wasn't nice about it. I'd say I was, firm, but not, again, like not screaming.
Mm-hmm. Was her son present?
No, it was just the two of us, again, outside. Well, I'll rephrase that because I can't 100% say her son wasn't right there, and as she's standing in the doorway. But as far as I know, no kids were present. Her son or her stepdaughter Desiree, because when the fight broke out, it was just the two of us in the living room, like living room doorway threshold, and they had to come downstairs to see what was happening.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to make sure I understand too. You called the police, is that correct?
Yes, I did. I was actually screaming and hoping that somebody was going to call the police before I had to, but unfortunately, nobody came outside. Desiree didn't call the police. Obviously, Ethan couldn't call the police. So
you were screaming. Was this before or after your head met the brick wall?
I want to say probably at the same time that happened, and definitely like 100% sure when I was on top of her, like basically subduing her to keep her from getting up and doing anything else for me. I'm like, the door's wide open, my phone's next to her, and I'm screaming, somebody call the police, call the police, call the police.
Okay. When the police arrived, who all did they speak with?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Okay, there we go. I know for a fact they spoke with me, and I believe they tried to speak with Amanda. I don't remember if they actually like made contact enough to get her statement, but I do know she was still there. And I remember her pulling out of the driveway, because at this point the police officer and I were standing in the yard next to the driveway. She gets in her car, backs out, pulls that out of the driveway down the street, and like waves at me like this as she's leaving. And the police officer even said, like, she wasn't supposed to leave. Someone's gonna have to go to her job and pick her up later or something like that. So I don't remember if he actually like tried to get a statement from her, got a statement or anything like that, but she was there. And then the police were also there when Greg arrived.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Examination, Mr. Lynch?
Ms. Morris.
Yes.
So you testified that before this incident happened, you were sitting on a green transformer or some kind of power box?
Yeah, those little boxes in yards or whatever.
And that's something you did frequently?
Very frequently, multiple times a day. Most of the day, I spent most of my time outside of the home.
Okay. And you said you told your friend who you were talking on the phone with that you had a bad feeling about that day. Is that correct?
Yes.
You thought that you kind of had a premonition that there was going to be discord with Miss Williams. Is that right?
If you define discord as, something not good happening, then yes.
Okay. And you spoke about how you had been previously the victim of abuse and you understood the cycle. And you weren't referring to Miss Williams, were you?
Physically, no. She has abused me in the past, yes, but physically, no. I've been physically abused by my dad, someone else in Ohio, things like that. So that's what I mean.
So she never physically abused you in any way.
No, she's never physically laid a hand on me, anything like that.
And prior to this incident, she had told you that she didn't want you to continue to live in her house. Is that correct?
Do you mean prior to the incident?
I mean,
No.
on the incident date.
During the incident, yes. For me telling her that I don't want to get in the car with her, next led to her telling me that I needed to get my stuff and get out. Before that, she nor Greg, no one told me that, they wanted me to leave.
Okay. And so it's your testimony to this court that under oath that you calmly and slowly walked up to Miss Amanda Williams and then she grabbed you by your head and slammed your head into a brick wall. Is that your testimony?
Yes, sir.
And afterwards, you pinned her down on the ground, correct?
Yes, sir.
You delivered multiple blows to her head, correct?
Probably so, yes.
This was in front of a minor child, correct?
Incorrect.
Okay.
It wasn't until I started screaming, call the police, call the police. She was actually pretty silent during the entire thing.
Okay. Prior to this incident, it's fair to say that Miss Williams had been a source of support for you. Is that fair to say?
Oh, 100%.
Okay. And no further questions.
All right, any follow-up from the state?
No, Your Honor, the state's going to rest at this time.
All right, hold on, Miss Morris, let me ask a couple questions. So
Yes, ma'am.
you came back from Ohio to live with Miss Williams and Mr. Cook?
No, ma'am. Originally, I came back to live with my dad. Like I said, I got abused there. Me and my dad had been in talks for a couple of weeks. He said that I could come down there and live with him. Of course, I can come home. I got there, and he and I had it out. We had a disagreement, and I said I wasn't going to stay in his house with him. Never even made it in the house. Sat outside on the curb. Believe I called my friend in Ohio, and I went live on Facebook talking about it, and then I received a text from Amanda asking me if everything was all right. Talked to her on the phone about what was going on. And she was in Oklahoma, and she's, basically said, well, I told you, to come live with me in the first place, which she did originally before I even tried to go live with my dad, wanted me to live with her. But I decided that I wasn't going to go down that path due to the way things ended when I lived with her as a teenager.
Well, how did things end?
Let's try to make it short. Again, we were working at Sonic together. She was, at the time she started working there, she was an assistant general manager, and another person was hired to be an assistant general manager, and they were kind of, I guess, battling for the general manager spot. Of course, I'm living with Amanda at the time. Me and the person I'm speaking about, her name is Emily Ferries. We ended up dating eventually, from Ohio. We got really close, became good friends, and started hanging out a lot. Amanda did not care for that, mainly because I no longer worked on her shifts with her. I wasn't really around at the house, helping out. You know, a lot of times I'd help out with Ethan, her son, help clean things, you know, stuff like that. I was very kind of underneath her wing, you know what I mean? And eventually I kind of just drifted away with her from her and started hanging out more with Emily. Um, we got into an argument once where she accused me of, well, this is way before me and Emily were ever intimate, accused me of, you know, being with Emily in that way and told me that I needed to move out and get my stuff and move out. At this time, we weren't at the house when she had this conversation with me. I was outside of Sonic. She was at Sonic on the clock and came outside to tell me that. And I ended up moving out and living with Emily slash living with my dad again in Conyers instead of Morrow for a little bit. But we all still worked at Sonic together. And at that point, there was a lot of animosity between her and Emily, somewhat her and me, but just not as much as her and Emily. And eventually, me and Emily both stopped working at Sonic. I moved to Ohio to work at a Sonic out here.
All right, did you move to Ohio with someone, or did you
Yes.
just say, I'm gonna pick Ohio and I'm gonna move there?
No, I moved to Ohio with someone. Like I said, at this point, I was I'd
Was
say
it Emily?
still homeless. Yes. So I was still homeless at the time for the most point. I was like living with my dad a little bit, but due to our history, I wasn't living there. I was staying with Emily, which
Okay.
was down the street from Sonic.
And then Emily moved back to Ohio and you moved with Emily.
Yes, she wanted to move back to Ohio. I eventually decided, you know, I'll come to Ohio with you. There's nothing for me here anyways.
Okay, so you stayed in Ohio. Things did not go well in Ohio.
Yes, but not immediately. There's at least like a 3-year time span between that. Things did go well at first. Of course, me and Emily ended up breaking up. She was abusive to me at some point as well, so we broke up. I started, you know, living on my own, things like that. And I think I was like 19 at the time. So honestly, I screwed a lot of stuff up. I lost my car, lost my house, stuff like that, not paying my bills, ended up being homeless again, staying with other friends and things like that in Ohio. My uncle passed away, and I ended up coming back to Georgia like shortly after that to live with my dad. So like this is all within from 2017 to actually, yeah, that's more than 3 years because I even went back home to Mississippi in 2020 for like a year. So by the time I came back to Georgia, I was only back in Georgia for about a month in 2022, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was Emily the friend that you were on the phone with, or was that somebody else?
No, the friend that I was on the phone with, her name is Chanel Smith. And we're actually like still friends to this day, like best friends.
All right. So on the day that this happened, so when you came back to live with Greg and Amanda, they talk a lot about how your personality changed from the first time
Oh, it
that you
definitely did.
them. Okay, so you acknowledge that there were some differences.
Yes, ma'am. Again, at the time, I was a teenager. Yes, I'd been through abusive things and stuff like that with my dad, but I still had, you know, school, extracurricular activities. I loved working at Sonic. It was kind of my whole life. So I was a very helpful, bubbly person. Ethan, her son, he kind of looked at me like a sibling. He didn't really understand that I was a girl, so he called me his brother, things like that. We were really close. And, you know, I took care of a lot of things around the house. Me and Amanda were, you know, I know the age difference is crazy, but we were basically best friends.
No, I mean, if you click with somebody. So then when you came back, you at the time you came back, you were more introspective and kind of preferred to be alone more.
Yes. At this point, I'd gone through, you know, my first real relationship. I'd moved out of state to Ohio, you know, no family, no friends except for Emily, gotten abused by her, lost everything. I'm not in college or anything like that. My life's pretty terrible. And then been abused and mistreated multiple times by other people in Ohio, as well as still dealing with the stuff from my dad, even from a distance.
So now you come back. You're welcomed back, I guess, into the home by Greg and Emily. I mean, by Amanda.
No, yeah.
Essentially, they're saying that, you know, as long as you're working, you know, you can stay there.
I wouldn't say they necessarily told me as long as I'm working, I can stay there, but they kind of didn't have to because my whole goal was, to work. Like I had a job lined up for me when I got down there, which was Sonic, but I started working with Amanda at Starlight instead, and helping out a friend, whatever, pretty much what she wanted me to do.
Okay, but then you went back to Sonic.
Yes.
Okay, so now with all this being said, what made you have a bad feeling on that day? Had you and Miss Williams had arguments, or you said there was no physical thing, but had y'all had arguments?
So when I was a teenager, of course,
no, but not that far.
Well, that's kind of what gives me that inclination of how she acts. So that's why I say I've been through a lot of situations with people where, I'd say I've never been, abused or mistreated like that by a random person. It's always been from a person I've been cool with friends, family, whatever. So I know their patterns. We're like this, we talk all the time. You share a lot of things with me, and then out of nowhere, you're distant. You don't really talk to me. I can just tell by your body language and your tone. And that's how it went with Amanda. And that's exactly how it went the first time as a teenager. The only difference then is she had never put her hands on me. It was just get out, you know what I mean? But this time around, it was her being distant for the most part. And I could tell one day we were out on the porch and Ethan was trying to talk to me. And I'm, in my space, the little green box, I'm on the phone with my friend and he's trying to talk to me, have fun, whatever. And I'm just not going forward. And I'm just like, I don't want to play right now. But he had asked me to play with him for probably a whole week. And I was pretty much just blowing him off. And that pissed Amanda off. Like she actually told me, like, I don't like the way you're treating my son. He really wants to talk with you and play with you, and you're ignoring him. And that's at the point where I believe, I don't know if I told it to Greg as well, but I do remember having that conversation like loud enough for everybody to know, like, I'm not the same person I was before. I keep telling everybody this. I'm not in a playful mood. I don't want to play. I don't want to sit around and chit chat and talk. I don't really want to be bothered. Like my life's in shambles. I'm trying to fix it. And obviously that made everybody uncomfortable.
All right. And so when she came out that day, had y'all, okay, let me ask this. Prior to that day, March, I guess, 30th, had she taken you to work before?
She had definitely taken me to work before at Starlight with her. I don't remember how long I worked there at the skating rink with her, maybe a week, maybe a little less. And I remember quitting to work at Sonic instead. So every day that I worked, maybe minus one day, she took me to work. Like we worked the same shift.
Okay. And so on this particular day, you said, I have a bad feeling and I just don't want to ride with you.
Yes. And a little into that is I felt that way as well because of what I just gone through with my dad. I got in the car with him. Everything was fine before we got in the car. As soon as we got in the car and we're on the highway, now, he's screaming and yelling at me. I'm trying to think of escape. I can't. Like I've been in those kind of situations before. And that's what I mean as far as I got a feeling like something great is not about to happen no matter what it is. I don't need to be like held hostage in a way. Like not saying she would have like kidnapped me, but more like there's no way I should get in a moving car with somebody that I'm not in control of that clearly has a problem with me. Like I know she's not happy at me. I didn't know she was angry, but I knew she wasn't happy with me. And all this is literally everything that I'm talking about is in the span of like 2.5, 3 weeks.
Okay. So last question. Do you know what PTSD? Well, last series of questions. Do you know what PTSD is?
Yes, I was actually diagnosed with PTSD shortly after coming back to Ohio after that incident.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Mr. Lynch, did you have any other questions?
No, I'm no further questions at this time, Judge.
All right, Mr. Tipton, did you have any other questions?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Argument.
Yes, Judge. I'd like you to pay attention to the many consistencies that are consistent between Ms. Williams' testimony, Mr. Cook's testimony, and even Ms. Morris's testimony. There's no allegations that there's past incidences of abuse. The only real difference in Ms. Morris's story is that in her version, she walks up calmly to my client, and my client then slams her head into a wall. You heard from Ms. Williams, who testified truthfully that that's not what happened at all, that in fact, Ms. Morris was hitting herself, that she was irate, that she was screaming, and that she ran at her in an aggressive manner, and that my client stepped in front of her child and pushed her away. And then Ms. Morris admits that she got on top of Ms. Williams and delivered multiple blows to her head. The testimony of the demeanor of Ms. Morris was testified to by Mr. Cook, which is not consistent with someone who was just being calm. So, Your Honor, I believe that the testimony of Ms. Williams that is largely consistent, except for on this one point with Ms. Morris and her ex-partner, does meet the standard of preponderance of an evidence that any act that she did, any physical contact she made with Ms. Morris was in self-defense. Mr. Tipton attempted to impeach her with a conviction from 20 years ago, even though that wasn't introduced, Your Honor. But if you listen to the testimony of Ms. Williams, which is corroborated with Ms. Morris, all Ms. Williams has been to Ms. Morris is a source of support, giving her a place to live, setting up GoFundMe accounts for her, trying to encourage her to work, and allowing her to live in her house. And when she wasn't, at a point, she asked her to leave and told her she was not going to be able to continue to live there. I don't think that, and that's not disputed. Ms. Morris admits that she had told her that prior to this incident. I don't think that's consistent with her just calmly walking up to her and then my client just out of nowhere slamming her head against the wall, especially when you consider there's no prior incidents of physical contact or abuse. Ms. Morris testified that she's been abused by a lot of people, and I don't necessarily dispute that. However, she was not abused by was Ms. Williams. Ms. Williams allowed her into her home, supported her, and when that wasn't working out, told her she had to go. And Ms. Williams did what she had to do to protect her minor child, who then had the traumatic event of witnessing his mother being beat on. I just believe Ms. Williams' testimony was credible. I believe it moves the needle past the preponderance of the evidence. And I believe that the consistencies with everything other than exactly how this incident transpired, the physical part of it, is enough for you to make a finding that Ms. Williams is immune from prosecution because her actions were justified as being in defense of herself and in defense of others. She testified to what she was thinking as she noticed Ms. Morris charging at her. I don't find it credible that Ms. Morris that Ms. Williams grabbed Ms. Morris by the head and slammed her head into a brick wall as she was walking at her calmly. There's no evidence of anything that would support Ms. Williams would behave in that manner. I believe all the testimony from Ms. Williams and from her ex-husband or ex-partner is consistent with Ms. Williams getting up here and telling the truth about what happened. So I would ask Your Honor to grant the defense motion, find that Ms. Williams is immune from prosecution, and dismiss this case against her.
Mr. Tipton?
Yes, Your Honor. So first off, Your Honor, I do want to make sure that the court's aware that the state's opinion is that much of what was testified to was, quite frankly, irrelevant. At the end of the day, we are concerned about what occurred on 3/30 of 2022. I don't think that the evidence of all these wonderful things that Miss Williams did, and they were wonderful, is necessarily relevant to what occurred on 3/30 of 2022. And likewise, I don't think Mr. Cook's testimony is particularly relevant because he wasn't present at the time. Likewise, Your Honor, we've heard this. We heard, and if I recall correctly, it was just from Miss Williams that a child was present, but no child testified to being present. No child was came on and said what happened. Given that that is Miss Williams's child, I assume it would have been very simple to bring that child. Now, with regard to the immunity motions, there are a few cases that I'd like to cite. I'd like to specifically start off by citing State v. Goodrum. That is a Superior Court case from Cobb County in 2020, where they laid out the tests that courts should follow regarding whether or not an immunity motion should be granted. And that is that the use of force must be reasonable, that the use of force must not be excessive, and that the parties must not be engaged in mutual combat. Now, that the site on that, it's a Lexis site. It's 2020 GA Super Lexis 1480. And specifically, I want to draw the court's attention to what will be page 10 on that and it will specifically lay out that test. The facts in that case are that there was a shooting, and that they had to go through all of the different. They had to go through and apply all of these to show that the defense had to show that there was not mutual combat that was willingly engaged in by both parties, that the use of force was not excessive, and the use of force was reasonable. In that case, someone got threatened and shot somebody. In this case, there's a difference regarding facts between what Miss Williams is saying and what Miss Morris is saying. Miss Morris is saying that she didn't touch Miss Williams until Miss Williams touched her, and that she walked calmly. That there may have been some type of argument, but that otherwise it was a calm walk. The proportionate response to an argument is not to bash someone's head into a wall. Likewise, Your Honor, the defendant specifically stated that Miss Morris had been hitting herself on the forehead. However, the injury to the head was well into her hairline on the top of her head. And the testimony of Miss Morris specifically said that Miss Williams had bashed her head into a brick wall, which her injuries appeared to be consistent with. Now, I also want to bring to the court's attention the imminent threat of violence, which the defense has not met. There was an argument made from Miss Williams that there was an imminent threat to her or her child. However, no other party corroborated that, and in fact, there was disagreement between her and Miss Morris about that. And the requirement that a threat be imminent has been established by the Georgia Court of Appeals in McDonald v. State. That's 170 Georgia App 884. And let's see if I have a pen site for that. And that's going to be at page. Okay, the Lexis page for it is 258. I'm sorry, 258. And lastly, Your Honor, I want to bring to the court's attention Roper v. State. That's a Georgia Supreme Court case. That is, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. I gave you the Penn site to Roper v. State previously. I meant to give you the imminent requirement from McDonald v. State. Let me get that to you. I'm sorry, that's McDonald v. Yeah. McDonald v. State is 170 Georgia App 884 at page 885. Excuse me. But Roper v. State specifically states that where a rational prior fact could find beyond a reasonable doubt, i.e., where there are two conflicting stories that could be credible, that should be left to the trier of fact. And specifically, Roper v. State is a case where there was a dispute about whether or not a victim had threatened the defendant with a gun, causing the defendant to shoot the victim. And the site for that, Your Honor, is 281 Georgia 878, and I'm specifically starting at page 879 and going through to a portion of 880. So for those reasons, Your Honor, the state believes that one, there's inconsistency between the two relevant testimonies. I do not believe that Mr. Cook's testimony is relevant at all, given that Mr. Cook was not present during the initial incident. And the whole issue that we're dealing with, Your Honor, is whether or not there was self-defense. Likewise, I do not believe the defense has met their burden in that they did not put, in that if there was this additional witness who would have been very well available, they did not provide that witness. Further, Your Honor, because there are differences between the two stories, that Roper v. State would call for this to be taken to a rational trier of fact. And with that, Your Honor, the state respectfully requests that the court deny the defense's motion.
All right, so put aside anything testified to by Mr. Cook, the consistencies are that the initial time of staying together was pretty much a good experience. Ms. Morris had some issues with her dad. That came up there, there was some issues with one of the ladies that she worked with and Miss Williams. But all in all, it was positive enough for that when Miss Morris went to Ohio and came back, when she needed a place to stay, she didn't hesitate to come back to stay with Miss Williams. And so I'm not taking into all the fundraising and all of that stuff, don't care about. But when she went away and came back, they were on a good enough footing for her to come back into that household. What they both are consistent about is that Miss Morris's demeanor changed and she was vastly different from the person who was there the first time. What they're consistent about is that Miss Williams had given her a ride to work before, and this was not out of the norm on that day for her to offer Miss Morris a ride to work. What is consistent is both of them talk about Miss Morris spending a considerable amount of time just sitting on the green transformer box in the yard, and as she was doing on that day. What is consistent is that on that day, Miss Williams once again said, "Hey, I'm going to give you a ride to work. Let's go." But on that day, for a bad feeling, which Miss Morris hasn't provided an actual reason stemming from an action that Miss Williams took on that day or immediately prior to that situation, she had a bad feeling about this situation and decided that she didn't want to ride with Miss Williams. Where the inconsistencies come is where Miss Williams says she went back to get her purse. Miss Morris was at the end of the driveway. When she looked around, Miss Morris was approaching. And by the time she went to go close the door, which she said it admits that she hit Miss Morris or pushed Miss Morris when she was attempting to close the door as she was backing into the house, then the consistency again is that Miss Morris was on top of her. Blows were thrown. Miss Morris said she was yelling for somebody to call the police. Miss Williams was on the floor, and Miss Morris was hitting her. This is such a difficult situation because I really, really, really believe that on that day, Miss Williams didn't do anything to be the protagonist in this case. She did the same thing she had done previously. It was Miss Morris who had the bad feeling, who decided she wasn't gonna take the ride, who then advanced towards the house. And as Miss Williams is backing into the house, trying to close the door, the contact was made. But I don't believe that the contact was initiated for anything other than her protecting herself. And then she says the child was in the doorway, so protecting the child. Even if let's assume that the child wasn't even there, but moving back into the house and protecting herself. At this point, based on the testimony that has been given by both the relevant parties, as Mr. Tipton says, Miss Morris and Miss Williams, I think Miss Williams' actions on that date were reasonable and under the standard for a motion for immunity. I believe that that standard has been met, and so that this time the court grants the motion for immunity from prosecution to Miss Williams. All right. So Mr. Lynch, draft the order.
Yes, Your Honor.
The difficulty for the court is that I believe that Miss Morris has been through more than any person should ever have to go through. Things that are so negative, and so many adults have failed her in her development. And I believe that just until there's some help for Miss Morris, I don't know that she's going to be able to move forward. When you're abused by multiple people, that has repercussions throughout your life. And Miss Morris, I apologize on behalf of all of those people who failed you. I apologize that you didn't have a safe space. And so I hope that you're able to move forward from this point. I noticed that you have a job with a particular company. I'm not going to call that company out, but if they have an employee assistance program that will provide counseling of any type, I would advise that you may want to seek that counseling, because it's difficult for me having to make this decision. I believe I am firm in my belief that I've made the right decision, but I'm also firm in the belief that you have been ill-treated by a lot of people in your life, and you're not going to be able to move past that until you focus on getting better, and with the help of a therapist or somebody who can help you kind of work through that. And so for those reasons, like I said, I do believe I made the right decision, but I do encourage you to seek counseling that may help you move forward in life, because I think you still deserve the opportunity to go to college and to develop and to have all of those things that should come to you. Okay. So at this time,
May I say something before we go?
yes, ma'am.
I would like to say that since that time, I've actually sought a lot of help, counseling, and then some. I am actually doing great. However, this entire journey right here, something that I completely forgot about and didn't even think was going to move forward, has actually done less in helping my progression, because honestly,
It
I would
brings
have
up,
rather I would have just let it go at that point. Honestly, like, no one really talked to me throughout this entire thing until a week or two before, the court date comes up. No one's really gotten my testimonies, things like that, before this even happened today. So at the end of the day, everything happens for a reason. I just want to say that just because I've been through a lot of stuff in my life with others, and she had not been one of those people until that day, does not mean that my events did not happen. And also, as no one asked me, if she was in such fear for her son, why didn't she call the cops? But you've already given your decision. It is what it is, and God bless you all, but it is what it is.
All right, Ms. Morris, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll expect that order. Unless we have something else that I don't know about, court will be adjourned.
Hey, Your
Thank you,
Honor,
guys. Have a good one.
Your Honor, I
Right.
do just want to perfect one thing on the record.
Yes,
The
Mr.
state-
Tipton.
Yes, Your Honor. The state has reached out several times to Ms. Morris, including throughout 2023 and 2024. And we did not, and this is the first time that she has informed anyone from the state that she wanted this case to be let go of. Had that been something that was brought to our attention, we would have let it go.
All right, I get it. All right, so at this time, the court has ruled the court is